thankful for those of you that are visiting. Genesis 37, if you open your Bible there, we're going to read through a passage tonight and try to get a thought. Brother Colton said something in his prayer that caught my ear. He said that we would learn something and that we would apply it. And that's the purpose of studying God's Word, that we learn something and that we apply it. And so I trust that will be the case tonight, that we would learn something in God's Word, and then that through that it would be applied unto our lives. Genesis 37, I know we're dealing with a topic that we've been studying through the book of Genesis in our Sunday school quarterly this time, and nearing the end of the quarterly, maybe one more week or so in that. And I'm certainly not going to try to re-preach or try to preach a Sunday school lesson by any means, but I want to try to look in the account of Joseph and try to take something out of there that I had never seen before until I was recently studying through this particular account. And hopefully through this that we will see truly what even the Lord taught us in the New Testament. So Genesis chapter 37, we're going to read a pretty good many scriptures tonight, especially in this particular chapter to set the stage. So let's begin reading in verse 1 of Genesis chapter 37. And Jacob dwelt in the land wherein his father was a stranger, in the land of Canaan. These are the generations of Jacob. Joseph, being 17 years old, was feeding the flock with his brethren. And the lad was with the sons of Bilhah and with the sons of Zilpah, his father's wives. And Joseph brought unto his father their evil report. You remember that the family of Joseph was not a very functional family. In many ways they were dysfunctional. There was one father in the home. There were 4 mothers in the home. There were 12 boys and 1 girl, and a lot of ways that there was a lot of jealousy there, a lot of animosity there. Certainly it's always been God's plan for one man to marry one woman, not multiple spouses. And so that Joseph, I guess there were a lot of reasons why Joseph could have blamed his upbringing for, going a particular direction in life. A lot of people do that. Here's why I am what I am. It's because of how I was raised. Yet Joseph, I know we maybe say sometimes that he rose above his raising, so to speak. I'm not saying his father was a bad father in every way, but certainly a lot of things he could have done different. And so that Joseph, being 17 years old, that he is with his brothers, his stepbrothers, half-brothers, and that would have been Dan and Naphtali and Gad and Asher, the sons of Bilhah and the sons of Zilpah. This is his father's concubines or maids that he had been given to wife. And I don't know what they did, but Joseph brought an evil report unto their father. Again, there could be a lot of speculation concerning what they were doing, and yet we don't know. We just know that Joseph understood it was wrong, and he went back and he told his father. I don't think he was just tattling on them. I think this was in God's plan, because there were some promises that God had made back in Genesis chapter 15 concerning that the children of Israel would be strangers in a strange land for 400 years, and then at the end of that 400 years that he would bring them out with a strong hand, and all that's being set in motion here. Verse 3, now Israel, that's the name for Jacob. The Lord had changed his name to Israel. Israel loved Joseph more than all his children, because he was the son of his old age, and made him a coat of many colors. And when his brethren saw that their father loved him more than all his brethren, they hated him and could not speak peaceably unto him. So you see in verse 4 here that, the statement is made in verse 3 that Jacob did. He did love Joseph more than his other children, and it was because of, 2 things. One thing, that Joseph was born unto him when he was an old man, and maybe the more important thing is that Joseph was born of his favorite wife. My 2 children are from my favorite wife too. I've only got one wife. And so Jacob had difficulties there. But I want you to notice something here. It said he did love them more, but then verse 4, Brother Allen, they perceived that he loved them more, or that he loved Joseph more. And because of that you see they begin to have animosity. They hate him. They see him. That's all they can think about. Verse 5, Joseph dreamed a dream and told it his brethren, and they hated him yet the more. And he said unto them, hear, I pray you, this dream which I have dreamed. For behold, we were binding sheaves in the field, and lo, my sheaf arose and also stood upright, and behold, your sheaves stood round about and made obeisance to my sheaf. The word obeisance there means to bow down. And so you think about that they had sheaves of grain. They would cut the grain, and then they would take it and put it in bundles and tie it together. And he says that he dreams this dream, and their sheaves, that they bow down to his sheaf. Verse 8, and his brethren said to him, shalt thou indeed reign over us? Or shalt thou indeed have dominion over us? And they hated him yet the more for his dreams and for his words. So there's already animosity in their heart toward him. They perceive that his father loves him more, and that is evident by this coat of many colors that he gives them. And now Joseph's dreaming these dreams, and I don't know who interpreted these dreams. I guess the dreams were pretty self-explanatory, that it simply stands for the fact that one day, that he's telling them, one day you're going to bow down to me. Verse 9, and he dreamed another dream and told it his brethren and said, behold, I have dreamed a dream more, and behold, the sun, the moon, and the 11 stars made obeisance to me. And he told it to his father and to his brother, and his father rebuked him and said unto him, what is this dream that thou hast dreamed? Shall I and thy mother and thy brethren indeed come to bow down ourselves to thee, to the earth? So the second dream he has is very similar to the first, with the addition that his father and his mother, and of course his mother Rachel was dead, but I believe it's just simply speaking here of his father's wife. And so it says that in verse 11, his brothers envied him. They were very, very jealous. They hated him more, but his father observed the saying. And his brethren went to feed their father's flock in Shechem. And Israel said unto Joseph, do not thy brethren feed the flock in Shechem? Come, and I will send thee unto them. He said unto him, here am I. And he said to him, go, I pray thee, see whether it be well with thy brethren and with the flocks, and bring me word again. So he sent him out of the vale of Hebron, and he came to Shechem. I can imagine that Jacob knew that his brothers hated him. I think that was pretty evident at this time. Why would he send him into an isolated place to go check on these boys that hate him? And the only explanation I can give you is that it's just part of God's plan and God's purpose. And we certainly can see that because we know the end of the story. So he goes, he's obedient, and he goes and does exactly what his father asked him to do. And it says that, as he's going, that he can't find him, and there's a certain man he runs into, and he says, I'm looking for my brother, and he tells him, well, I saw him, and I heard him say we're going to Dothan. And so Joseph goes to Dothan. Let's drop down to verse 18. And when they saw him afar off, even before he came near unto them, they conspired against him to slay him. I wonder how they recognized him way off. You say, well, how far off was it? Was it 100 yards? I think it was a few miles, because there was a lot that went on between the time they recognized him and the time that he got there. How do you reckon they recognized him? I think it was his coat. That's all they've got on their minds. That's all they think about. They're obsessed with this coat that his father's given him, because it's a symbol of the fact that he favors him more than he favors us. And so here's their plan. As they see him far off, they conspire against him. They begin to say, well, here's our opportunity. Here's what we'll do. Verse 19, and they said one to another, behold, this dreamer cometh. Come now therefore, and let us slay him, and cast him into some pit. And we will say, some evil beast hath devoured him, and we will see what will become of his dreams. And so they just talk among themselves. They say, well, let's kill him. We'll hide his body. We'll cast him into some pit. And, we'll say, some wild animals come and guide him. And we'll see what happens to his dream. I'm going to tell you something tonight, that if it was just Joseph's dreams, they could have cast him into a pit, they could have killed him, and it would have caused his dreams to cease to be fulfilled. But it wasn't Joseph's dreams. It's the word of God that's coming unto Joseph, and God's word will be fulfilled. And so they say, well, here's our opportunity. Verse 21, and Reuben heard it. Reuben was the firstborn. And he delivered him out of their hands and said, let us not kill him. And Reuben said unto them, shed no blood, but cast him into this pit that is in the wilderness, and lay no hand upon him. And then it tells you why he did that he might rid him out of their hands to deliver him to his father again. So Reuben, his desire in saying this, let's don't kill him, but let's just throw him into a pit. What Reuben was thinking in his mind, the reason we know this is because it says it, that he's going to come back later and he's going to get Joseph out of this pit. And he's going to take him back to his father. He's the oldest son. And I guess in some ways that he bore some responsibility for the younger son. Verse 23, and it came to pass when Joseph was come unto his brethren, that they stripped Joseph out of his coat of many colors that was on him. And they took him and cast him into a pit, and the pit was empty. There was no water in it. And verse 25 is an awful, awful verse. And they sat down to eat bread. Why's that so awful? Well, they've taken their brother, and they've thrown him into a pit, and then they sit down to eat lunch. But here's what makes it so bad. Chapter 42, verse 21. Just hold your spot here. Let's flip over there. It's not that they just threw him in and he's sitting down in the pit, playing solitaire. It's not like that at all. Chapter 42, verse 21. This is later on as they're thinking in their mind that we're being punished for what we did to our brother. And they said one to another, we are verily guilty concerning our brother, in that we saw the anguish of his soul when he besought us, and we would not hear. You catch that? We are guilty concerning our brother because we saw the anguish of his soul, and we would not hear. Evidently, what was Joseph doing as they cast him into this pit? He's begging and pleading and crying, get me out of here, help me. And with all that in the background, they're sitting there eating a sandwich, And it says in verse 25, I'm sorry, we'll go back, chapter 37. They sat down to eat bread, they lifted up their eyes and looked, and behold, a company of Ishmaelites came from Gilead with their camels, bearing spicery and balm and myrrh, going to carry it down to Egypt. So as they're sitting there and they're really probably wondering, well, what are we going to do with him now? We've thrown him into a pit, but there's no water in it, so it's not going to kill him. Are we just going to go off and leave him, or what are we going to do? Here comes this traveling caravan, and they're coming probably from India or somewhere in that direction, and they're going to Egypt, and they're going there to make money. They're merchants is what they are. Camels were like the 18-wheelers of that day, and so they're coming with their wares. And verse 26, Judah said to his brethren, what profit is it if we slay our brother and conceal his blood? Come, let us sell him to the Ishmaelites, and let not our hand be upon him, for he is our brother and our flesh, and his brethren were content. And it tells you that they sold him to this group of people for 20 pieces of silver, and they brought Joseph into Egypt. Drop down to verse 31. I'm trying to skip some for time's sake and yet get the full thought. Verse 31, and they took Joseph's coat and killed a kid of the goats and dipped the coat in the blood. And they sent the coat of many colors, and they brought it to their father. Let me stop for just a minute. They took Joseph's coat and they killed a kid of the goats and dipped the coat in the blood. They're doing this to send it back to Jacob. And what we read here is that evidently they didn't take the coat in person to Jacob. They must have given it to one of the servants, because it said they sent the coat back. And they sent it back with this word that this is what we found. And we don't know if it's his coat or not, but it looks like it. And they're going to allow Jacob to draw his own conclusion. They're not going to tell him what happened. They're going to say, is this Joseph's coat? Is this your son's coat? In verse 33, it says that he knew it, and he said, it's my son's coat. An evil beast hath devoured him. And Joseph is without doubt rent in pieces. Let me point out something to us right here. Let's go back in our minds, but we won't turn back and read it. Go back into your mind when Isaac is an old man. And it comes time for him to give the blessing. And he calls Esau and he tells him, I want you to go out into the field and I want you to take that venison. You take an animal, you kill it, and you come back and you cook it and you make that savory meat that I love. And I will eat it and I will bless thee and then I will die. Rebekah hears it. What does she tell Jacob? Go get 2 kids of the goats. You bring them to me. And I can cook it just like that venison that Esau is going to bring. And what we'll do is we will deceive your father and we'll get you the blessing. You don't believe that you'll reap what you sow? Jacob reaped what he sowed, didn't he? In the very manner in which he sowed it. He sowed it with these kids of the goats. His father's deceived by these kids of the goats. And Brother Kevin, now Jacob is deceived by the same thing. He's deceived by the blood of the kids of the goats. Verse 34, and Jacob rent his clothes, put sackcloth upon his head, upon his loins, and mourned for his son many days. In verse 35, and all his sons and all his daughters rose up to comfort him. But he refused to be comforted. You talk about hypocritical. They went and tried to comfort their father. And they were the ones that had done it. They knew the truth. They knew Joseph wasn't dead. At least he wasn't dead when he went out into the sunset that night, you know. Went over the horizon with those people bound, crying out. And they wouldn't hear him. But they go and try to comfort him. Here several years ago, there was a very prominent man down in Stone County that had a business. And they found him beaten to death at his business. And it was just, the whole county was up in arms, you know, that what in the world? Who can do something like this? And of course, they took the body and did autopsies and all that, and had the funeral. And even during that, you know, the media were reporting it and showed the family, and the wife just, you know, torn apart because her husband had been killed. What did we find out a few weeks later? She paid a guy to kill him. And I wonder how you can do that, you know. But that's what they did. Let me just summarize some things, and we're going to go over to chapter 43 if you want to go ahead and turn over there. Joseph sold into Egypt, or he's sold to these Ishmaelites, these Midianites, and those are interchangeable terms. They take him to Egypt, and a captain of the guard, Pharaoh, by the name of Potiphar, buys him. And he makes him a servant in his house. And Joseph is a man that Potiphar can see that there's something different about him. The Lord's with him. And he puts him over all of his house, everything he has, except he said all he knew is that he had plenty to eat. He trusted Joseph with everything. And then we know that Potiphar's wife began to seduce Joseph day after day after day. And Joseph put up some barriers. He knew that his flesh was weak, so he put up some barriers where he wouldn't fall prey to this temptation. And yet there came the day when she set him up, was in the house alone, and that he refused to lie with her. She grabbed onto his coat. He ran. And when Potiphar got home, she said, look, this Hebrew servant that you brought in here, that he has mocked me, and that he desired to defile me, and that I hollered, I screamed, and he ran, and I grabbed his coat, and now I've got it with me. And it said Potiphar was enraged. He was angered. But he didn't kill him. Why do you reckon Potiphar didn't have him killed? He could have. But Wilford, I think Potiphar trusted Joseph more than he trusted his wife. I think he probably understood the kind of woman she was. So he has Joseph put in prison. But what prison is Joseph put in? He's put in the king's prison. where the king's prisoners are. And there's a reason for that. I don't know this for sure, but it said that the one over the prison was the captain of the guard. You reckon Potiphar might have been over the prison? You reckon that might have been his job in the kingdom? Possible. If that's the case, there's a reason he didn't kill him. He put him there. And it wasn't long, Brother Willie, before it said that the master of the prison saw that the Lord was with Joseph, and he puts him over the prison. And one day these two men come in. They're thrown into prison. The chief baker and the chief butler of Pharaoh. And they've offended Pharaoh. And they're cast in prison. And at the end of probably a year, the Bible says a season, that they have dreams. Each one of them a different dream. The chief baker dreams that he's got these 3 baskets on his head, and in this top basket's all these baked meats. And it said that the birds of the air came and ate those things, devoured those things out of the basket. The chief butler dreams a dream, and that there are 3 vines, and those 3 vines produce grapes, and these grapes get fully ripe, and he squeezes them out into Pharaoh's cup. And they don't know the interpretation of the dream. And God gives Joseph an interpretation. He tells the chief butler that in 3 days that you're going to be restored back to your position with Pharaoh, and he tells the chief baker in 3 days that your head's going to be taken off, that you're going to be killed. And sure enough, that's exactly what happened. The butler was restored, the baker was killed, and Joseph told that butler something. He said, when you get to Pharaoh, he said, would you tell him that there's a prisoner down here in the dungeon that's here of no fault of his own. He's done nothing wrong. He's been brought down here. He's been enslaved and brought here. He's been falsely accused. And the chief butler said that he would tell Pharaoh. But he forgot, didn't he? 2 years went by, nothing. And then Pharaoh has his dreams. And we know the dreams that Pharaoh had. The seven cows, fat flesh, and pretty, they come up out of the water. And then 7 thin cows, and the 7 thin cows eat the 7 fat cows, and they're still thin. And then the stalks of corn the same way. 7 good ones and 7 bad ones. The 7 bad ones eat the 7 good ones. And Pharaoh brings all his magicians and his enchanters and all these people down there. He says, tell me the interpretation of the dream. We can't. The chief butler, I believe this is how he said it. Pharaoh, I don't want to bring this up, but you remember when you threw me in prison? I wouldn't want to bring it up either. He said, I remember my faults this day, is how he said it. I don't think he wanted to bring this back because Pharaoh had the power to kill him. Pharaoh could have said, I do remember that. Why are you here? But he said, I remember my faults this day. He said, back when we were in prison, that there was a little Hebrew guy, and he interpreted our dreams, and it came to pass exactly like he said. Pharaoh said, bring him to me. They went and they got Joseph. They cleaned him up. They shaved him. They brought him before Pharaoh. Pharaoh shared the dreams, and Joseph said, look, I can't interpret dreams, but God can. And if he'll give me the interpretation, he said, I'll reveal it to you. And God gave him the interpretation. There'll be 7 great years, then there'll be 7 awful years. And during the 7 great years that you need to save up, you need to prepare for the bad years. Pharaoh said, well, I'm going to need somebody to put over that. Why don't you do it? And so he puts Joseph second in command. Puts a robe on him. Joseph had lost his coat twice already, hadn't he? He lost it back when his brothers took it from him, and he lost it when Potiphar's wife took it. But he gets a coat, and it's a royal coat now. He gets a chain around his neck. He gets a ring on his finger. And he begins doing all these things in preparation for those 7 years of famine. And those 7 years go by. And then the 7 bad years come. And sometime into that, I believe about 2 years had passed. As we go over into chapter 43, that Jacob and his children back in Canaan had run out of food, and he had sent those boys down there to get food. And they had gone down there, and when they got there, Joseph recognized them. They didn't recognize him. And he begins to ask questions. Who are you? Why are you here? You're nothing but spies is all you are. They said, no, we're not. They said, we're all the sons of one man. He said, well, is there any others? Do you have a father? They said, we do. He's an old man. And we got one more brother that's back home. He's young. And said that we got another brother, and he's not. In other words, he's dead. We don't know about him. Well, Joseph was the other brother they were talking about. Joseph said, here's what I'm going to do. He said, I'm going to test y'all. I mean, he didn't say that, but in his mind, that I'm going to keep one of you. And the rest of you go back. And he said, don't you come back into Egypt unless you bring that youngest brother back. You just will not come. You won't be getting anything else. And he kept Simeon. And he went home. Or the other brothers went home. And what did they find in their sacks when they got home? They found all the money they had taken was in their sack. And they began to get worried. Oh my goodness. What has happened here? They're going to think we stole it. So when their corn was used up, Jacob said, boys, about time to go back to Egypt. Y'all go back. Same group, go back to Egypt. Get us some more corn. They said, Daddy, that man down there told us not to come back unless we had that boy. Well, why'd you tell him he was here? Well, he asked us. We were honest with him. Reuben says, I'll send him back. I'll take responsibility for him. Joseph basically said, no way. Or Jacob, rather. I'm sorry. Jacob said, no way. Jacob knew he couldn't trust Reuben. But as you go down to chapter 43, verse 8, Judah stepped up. Judah said unto Israel, his father, send the lad with me, and we will arise and go, that we may live and not die, both we and thou, and also our little ones. I will be surety for him. Of my hand shalt thou require him, if I bring him not unto thee, and set him before thee. Then let me bear the blame forever. Judah says, Daddy, I'll be responsible for Benjamin. I'll be surety for him. The word surety is, I'll be a guarantee, I'll be a bond. He'll come home. I'll make sure of that. And so reluctantly, Jacob sends him. And they get back down into Egypt. Benjamin's with them. Go down to verse 29. I promise you I've got a thought. Verse 29. And he lifted up his eyes and saw his brother Benjamin, his mother's son, and said, is this your younger brother of whom you spake unto me? And he said, God be gracious unto thee, my son. And Joseph made haste, for his bowels did yearn upon his brother. This is his only full brother. You notice, I think you understand what's happening here. When Joseph sees him, he's overcome with emotion. And he sought where to weep, and he entered into the chamber and wept there. And he washed his face and went out and refrained himself and said, set on bread. He finally got his composure back. He washed his face, no evidence that he had been crying. He goes back out, and he tells him, he said, let's eat. We're going to make a meal together. Verse 32, and they sat on for him by himself, and for them by themselves, and for the Egyptians which did eat with him by themselves, because the Egyptians might not eat bread with the Hebrews. That's an abomination to the Egyptians. And they're going to seat them all separately. But notice this, verse 33, and they sat before him, the firstborn according to his birthright, and the youngest according to his youth, and the men marveled one at another. You understand what just happened? Joseph just arranged them, oldest to youngest. Sort of perks their attention, but they still don't have a clue it's Joseph. Verse 34, and he took and sent messes unto them from before him. But Benjamin's mess was 5 times so much as any of theirs, and they drank and were merry with him. I want to point something out to you. This kind of get to the thought here. It said that Benjamin's mess, or his meal, was 5 times as much as any of theirs. Why did they hate Joseph to start with? Favoritism, wasn't it? Oh, he loves us. Our Father loves him more than he loves us. What do you see here? Favoritism. Benjamin gets, when it says it's 5 times as much, I don't know if he got the rest of them got 12-ounce steaks and he got a 60-ounce steak. I think it means it was so much better than theirs. They had hot dogs and he had a filet, you know. Whatever it was obvious that Benjamin is being treated better. Well, last time one was treated better, they said, let's kill him. Let's see what happens this time. Chapter 44, I'm just going to summarize a little bit, and then we'll read a little bit toward the end and get our thought and close. After they eat, that he commands them to bring their sacks, and he'll fill them up with corn as usual. And it says in verse 2, Joseph instructed his servants to put his silver cup in the sack's mouth of the youngest, which was Benjamin, and his corn money. And so they did. So you think about this, the brothers don't know that this is all taking place, so they leave. I think they leave going, phew, well, he made it out there alive. That guy is cruel. But they leave and they're on their way. And all of a sudden, here comes some chariots. And it's Pharaoh's men. And they say, one of you has stolen Joseph's silver cup. They said, none of us done that. Check it. We're honest. Look, they remind them, said, look, when we found that money in our sacks last time, we brought all that back. We didn't even try to keep that. We were afraid it was a mistake. If we'd be honest in that way, we sure hadn't stole his cup. They make a statement in verse 9. With whomsoever of thy servants it be found, both let him die, and we also will be my Lord's bondmen. They said, you search us. If you find it with one of us, kill him, and the rest of us will be slaves. And so they begin to look. And they found it in the last place they looked. You always find something in the last place you look, don't you? The last place they looked was Benjamin's sack, and there it was. Verse 12, he searched, began at the eldest, left at the youngest. The cup was found in Benjamin's sack. Then they rent their clothes and laded every man his ass and returned to the city. And Judah and his brethren came to Joseph's house, for he was yet there, and they fell before him on the ground. Verse 15, and Joseph said unto them, what deed is this that you have done? Wot ye not that such a man as I can certainly divine? Joseph's not being arrogant at that time, saying, don't you know that I can see things, in the future? I know what you do, whether I see it or not. He's maintaining his cover here as an Egyptian. He said, didn't you know that I could figure this out if you did it? And Judah said, what shall we say unto my Lord? What shall we speak, or how shall we clear ourselves? Judah said, look, is there some way what would make this right? God hath found out the iniquity of thy servants. Behold, we are my Lord's servants, both we and he also, with whom the cup is found. He said, look, we'll just all be slaves. But look at verse 17. Here's what Joseph responded to him. God forbid that I should do so. But the man in whose hand the cup is found, he shall be my servant. And as for you, get you up in peace unto your father. Notice what Joseph tells him. No, you're not all going to be servants. The one that we found, we're going to keep him, and y'all can go back home. It wasn't your fault. He's the one that did it. Verse 18, then Judah came near unto him. Brother Willie, I believe they're all just over there as a group, kind of with their arms folded. Go, look, what can we do? And I believe Judah stepped out, and he walked over to Joseph. He said, look, can I speak to you privately? And here's a conversation they had. Verse 18, O my Lord, let thy servant, I pray thee, speak a word in my Lord's ears. Let not thine anger burn against my father, for thou art even as Pharaoh. My Lord asked his servant, saying, have you a father or a brother? And we said unto my Lord, we have a father, an old man, and a child of his old age, a little one, and his brother is dead, and he alone is left of his mother, and his father loveth him. And thou saidst unto thy servants, bring him down unto me, that I may set mine eyes upon him. And we said unto my Lord, the lad cannot leave his father, for if he should leave his father would die. And thou saidst unto thy servants, except your youngest brother come down with you, you shall see my face no more. He's just reiterating or going back through their past that, look, I've told you the truth, and you said don't come back lest your brother comes. And he said, that's what we've done. Verse 24, and it came to pass, when we came up unto thy servant my father, we told him the words of my Lord. And our father said again, go and buy us a little food. And we said, well, we can't go if our youngest brother doesn't, if he's not with us, then we're not going to go, for we may not see the man's face except our younger brother be with us. And thy servant, my father, said unto us, ye know that my wife bare me 2 sons, that's Joseph and Benjamin. And the one went out from me, and I said, surely he is torn in pieces, and I saw him not since. And if you take this also from me, and mischief befall him, you shall bring down my gray hairs with sorrow to the grave. He's telling him what Jacob said. Look, you take Benjamin, and something happens to him, said it'll kill me. Now Judah says, now therefore when I come to thy servant my father, and the lad be not with us, seeing that his life is bound up in the lad's life, it shall come to pass when he seeth that the lad is not with us, that he will die. And thy servant shall bring down the gray hairs of thy servant our father with sorrow to the grave. For thy servant became surety for the lad unto my father, saying, if I bring him not unto thee, then I shall bear the blame to my father forever. Now therefore I pray thee, with all of this being known, let thy servant abide instead of the lad, a bondman to my Lord, and let the lad go up with his brethren. For how shall I go up to my father, and the lad be not with me, lest peradventure I see the evil that shall come on my father? So, preacher, what's the point of all this? Let's go back just a second. When they saw Joseph coming and they conspired against him, was it really Joseph they hated? I understand they hated Joseph, but even more so, didn't they hate their father? They didn't care about what it was going to do to their father. It wasn't a concern of them. They knew it would break his heart, but they didn't care. But there's a lot of years that have passed. And now what does Judah say? He says, you can't keep him. Because if you keep him, he said, he'll kill my father. Keep me. Keep me. 1 John chapter 2, let's read one verse. Chapter 4, 1 John chapter 4. Verse 20. If a man say, I love God, and hateth his brother, he is a liar. For he that loveth not his brother whom he hath seen, how can he love God whom he hath not seen? And this commandment have we from him, that he who loveth God love his brother also. How did Judah and these boys the second time, how did they prove that they love God? How did they prove they love their father? By loving their brother. How did they prove the first time that they didn't love their father? By not loving their brother. Today, do you see how as their life progressed, as their love for their father increased, their love for their brother increased? The more we love God, the more we're going to love our brother. How do you love God? How do you prove you love God? It's not necessarily by coming to church, by doing all of these things. Brother Kyle, you prove you love God by you love your brother. They didn't care about their father the first time. They didn't care what they did to their brother. But the second time, their love for their father caused them to have great love for their brother. Do you love God? He said, the greatest commandments, love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, all thy soul, all thy mind, and love thy neighbor as thyself. Who's your neighbor? It's your brother. we show our love for God by loving one another. Let's have a song.